And so it is. And so it is. And so it is. And so it is. And that's what it sounds like, and that's what it feels like to make a decision. That we are not going to live according to the old story, the small story, but we're going to live according to the magnificent story, according to your name. This is how we make that choice. And what's so powerful is as soon as we make the choice in the way that we have done with elevated emotion, the universe, life itself, begins to respond to us, organizing itself in the unseen, bringing forth that thing which we desire. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. All right. Okay. Lord have mercy. Well, good morning. Good morning again, CSC. I just want to take time again to say thank you on behalf of my family. For your loving words and your kindness as we are moving through the process following the transition of my grandfather. I just thank you all so much for your love and your prayers and support because it is needed. So, we are in our series, The Superhero's Journey, and last week we started with Think Like a Hero, looking at the first movie of the Avengers saga, which is Captain America, the First Avenger. And in that message, Think Like a Hero, what I talked about was this idea that when we look at Steve Rogers, what's so powerful about him is we meet this young man who is skinny, small, weak, and sickly, who wants to fight in World War II because he wanted to do something that was good. He wanted to be a part of what was happening to help his fellow man, if you will. But what was interesting is the reason he was chosen to ultimately become this super soldier was not because he was strong, not because he was so huge or so great, but it was because of his character. It was because of how he showed up in the world. And so we recognize that in order to become a hero, we have to first think like a hero. We can't wait till we see the outer expression of being able to jump over fences and be stronger than ever, but actually it's out of being and living in that character, those attributes first, that then life brings the manifestation of us becoming a Captain America. Please go back to that message if you haven't seen it. So, as we talked about Steve Rogers last week with Captain America, I want to fast forward a little bit in the saga of the Avengers and particularly with Captain America because there's 3 solo Captain America movies, and the third one is very pivotal. Captain America Civil War. And in Captain America's Civil War, we meet a powerful character. Because this is the character where we meet a brother by the name of T'Challa. And I remember when we went to see that movie the first time, sisters were hollering at the screen just like that. When Brother Chadwick Boseman is there, he's got his swag. He's a prince. But he's standing, you just know he's somebody important, and he's there with his father, King T'Chaka. They're at the United Nations in Vienna to sign the Sokovia Accords, and there's a wonderful conversation between T'Challa and Natasha Romanoff, a little flirty banter going on there. And again, he's there with his father to support his father as these accords are about to be signed. And we actually don't know at this point yet that he already is the Black Panther. But again, by seeing him, you know that he's important. By seeing him, he's standing in this royal, regal nature. Now, before I move too deep into the story, I want to bring our mind back to what we talked about last week. The hero's journey is comprised of 3 acts, right? We have departure, initiation, and return. And what I shared last week is that within these acts, there are about 17 different stages. And just within Act 1, we talked about it last week, we have the call to adventure, refusal of the call, meeting the mentor or supernatural aid. We have crossing the first threshold, and then the last piece in Act 1 is the belly of the whale. And so in this moment, when we meet T'Chaka, he's actually about to enter the belly of the whale, and he doesn't know it, and we don't know it as we're watching it the first time, because what happens? Just before the accords are about to be signed, there's a bomb, and the building is blown up, and King T'Chaka is killed. T'Challa's father is gone, and now he must become the king of Wakanda. He's been thrown into the belly of the whale. Now, in our own lives, unwanted, traumatic, life-altering events take place all of the time. It may be a layoff, a breakup, an injury, or death of a loved one, a major accident, a bankruptcy, a failed business, a failed marriage, a hidden truth comes to the surface that knocks you completely off balance. We're thrown into the belly of the whale. This is the mirroring of what we're seeing on the screen when we watch T'Chaka now being given this profound responsibility, not just to be the Black Panther. He already was the Black Panther. But the greater responsibility of now having to lead a country, to now be the leader of Wakanda. And so many times when these inevitable challenges of life show up, we want to say and we feel like we're being tested. Yes, yes. We feel many times that someone or something is trying to give us a lesson or a test, but I want to give you a new word. We're not being tested, we're being initiated. We're being initiated into greatness. And I love this word, initiated. If we go to Webster's, there's just some beautiful things around this. In Webster's, it says initiate, to cause or facilitate the beginning of something. Set going, initiate a program of reform, enzymes that initiate termination. The second definition, induct into membership by or as if by special rights. The third definition, to instruct in the rudiments or principles of something. Introduce. And let's look at the synonyms. Begin, constitute, establish, inaugurate, found, innovate, institute, introduce, launch, pioneer, plant, set up, start. So if you find yourself, and when you find yourself in the belly of the whale, know that what's happening is you're now being initiated. You're now beginning something. You're now establishing something. You're now being inaugurated. You're now founding something new in, through, and as your life. You're now innovating. You're now instituting. This is what it means to be in the belly of the whale. But it's very interesting because Joseph Campbell writes something about this part, and I want to share. This is from The Hero with 1,000 Faces. I want to share this part with you. About being in the belly of the whale. And so he writes, here, instead of passing outward beyond the confines of the visible world, the hero goes inward to be born again. Now this is interesting because for those of you that may know and may recall, Jesus speaks about the Jonah story. He says, just as Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days, so the Son of Man must also be buried in order to rise again. This motif, we find it not only in Scripture, we find it in Native American tales, we find it all over the planet, this idea of being buried in the whale. And what this is about, being in the belly of the whale, is the opportunity to be born again. He goes on. This disappearance corresponds to the passing of a worshiper in the temple, where he is to be quickened by the recollection of who and what he is, namely dust and ashes, unless immortal. The temple interior, the belly of the whale, and the heavenly land beyond, above, and below, the confines of the world, are one and the same. That is why the approaches of and the entrances to temples are flanked and defended by colossal gargoyles, dragons, lions, devil slayers with drawn swords, resentful dwarves, winged bulls. These are the threshold guardians to ward away all incapable of encountering the higher silence within. So let's think about this. And you can go into New York and you can look at the cathedrals. Or you can go to Paris and look at the cathedrals. What do we always see, right? In the Western world, we see this in our cathedrals. The gargoyles, some kind of, scary images. It's weird, right? It's like it's a church. Why would there be this angry gargoyle on the outside of a church? But it was a symbol. It was a symbol to reflect what happens even in our own lives, because many times when the belly of the whale experience shows up, some of us say, no, I'm not dealing with that. I'm not going in there. Right? We bury our heads in the sands. We fight. We resist. And that's what these gargoyles represent. But what's interesting is those of us that are willing to go past the gargoyles, go past these images that we see, then we have the opportunity to be born again. And he goes a little deeper, where he says, the devotee at the moment of the entry into the temple, undergoes a metamorphosis. His secular character remains without, but he sheds as a snake its skin. Once inside, he may, he said, to have died to time and return to the world womb, the world navel, the earthly paradise. The mere fact that anyone can physically walk past the temple guardians does not invalidate their significance, for if the intruder is incapable of encompassing the sanctuary, he has effectively remained without. So what we're also talking about then, this belly of the whale is a womb. And so what we're doing is, at the moment that we're being initiated, at the moment that this unwanted experience shows up, at the moment that this challenge shows up, at the moment that we're knocked off our feet, at the moment that we feel like, I don't know what I'm going to do, or at the moment we feel like, I don't know how I can move forward anymore, or life has changed so significantly that I don't even know if I want to be here. We've now crossed the threshold. We've now courageously crossed past the gargoyles and those unwanted things, and now we have been placed in the womb with the idea that now it's time for us to shed. It's now time for what we knew ourselves to be to disintegrate and now integrate into something else, preparing for the new birth. And so the truth is, something must die and be let go of in order to be initiated into greatness. Old skin must be shed. And so it's interesting, even as we look at this symbol and this metaphor, the belly of the whale, for those of you who have seen the movie, if you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix. It was just on last night on TNT. They show it all the time, right? But in Civil War, as T'Challa is in the belly of the whale, he's filled with anger, he's filled with rage, and he's trying to avenge his father's death. And so there's a process that he has to go through in this womb to understand that vengeance is not his, and vengeance actually doesn't give him what he wants, and he has to release that anger. But to further the symbol of the belly of the whale, what happens? He, Captain America, and the Falcon, Sam Wilson, are put in jail. They're in the belly of the whale. We see this over and over again in so many different stories. When you look at the story of Joseph in Genesis, how does his story begin? Well, not begin, but the biggest part of the story, the belly of the whale, is when he's thrown into the pit by his brothers. That's what begins his metamorphosis, right? Again, we talked about Jesus, the same thing. The Son of Man must be placed in the ground. Just as a seed must be placed in the ground and die in order to resurrect, so is it the same for all of us. It's the same symbol over and over again. Later in the story, we also see that belly of the whale imagery is there again when they're in Siberia. They're in this facility that's, I think it was originally Hydra's facility. And in that time, there's some information that comes to Tony Stark or Iron Man, which sends him on a journey. Again, in the belly of the whale, it started something there. The symbol is all throughout this particular story, this particular movie, because it's important to the larger arc of what's happening within the Marvel Universe. So, as we have this moment and we see that T'Challa is trying to kill Bucky, the Winter Soldier, he's trying to kill him because he was the person responsible for his father's death. He unsuccessfully he doesn't succeed in trying to capture him. He himself ends up in jail. They get out. He's still trying to capture him until he finds out that what really happened was there's this guy that controlled his mind and made him do it. So now I got to go after the guy that controlled his mind to avenge my father's death, right? And so in that process, that's then where we meet him in Siberia. But he realizes something, because in that moment in Siberia, Tony Stark finds out something that he didn't know. He found out something about how his parents were killed, because he was told a story that wasn't true. And then he also found out that his good friend, Steve Rogers, Captain America, knew what really happened, but was protecting his best friend. This sounds like a soap opera. I always say this. I need y'all to hear this. These Marvel movies are soap operas for dudes. A lot of men think they ain't into soap operas. All this he said, she said stuff. So Steve Rogers is trying to protect his best friend, right? And so he doesn't tell his other friend what really happened. But it all comes out. And the enemy of the story, this guy, Helmut Zemo, he's the one that's basically orchestrated this whole moment to get them in this pit in Siberia to reveal this truth so that they would all kill each other. Because he was mad at them because they were responsible for the death of his family. Right. You see, all of this is belly of the whale stuff. And everybody has the opportunity for redemption. Everybody has the opportunity in the belly of the whale to shift and change and come to a greater understanding. But some people never come out of the belly of the whale. It's interesting, as Campbell writes about in The Hero of a Thousand Faces, this process, when we look at shamans, it's written that many shamans across many traditions, they go into the belly of the whale and they never return back into their bodies. They move into trance. They're known they're in some other realm or some other dimension, but they get stuck. And that's reflective of what can happen for each and every one of us. I was having a conversation with a friend. She was telling me about one of her girlfriends who had like a really bad breakup, I think a year ago. But she's just now, a year later, starting to feel that sense of grief or really allow herself. So for a year, she's just been stuck in the belly of the whale, not really conscious of it, right? Anybody ever been in that place where you come to and you realize, oh my goodness, I've been functionally depressed, or oh my goodness, I've just been walking around in a daze, just kind of doing things, by rote, but not actually living, right? I know for me, I think about going through my divorce, and I started a new job, just after my separation. And I was just a zombie for like months. Right? I don't really remember a lot about that time because I was just getting up, going to work, not really sleeping, not really eating, and just doing it all over again and doing it all over again till life woke me up because everything outside of me didn't feel good. Right? Life woke me up because I didn't like how my life felt. I didn't like how my life looked. And I had to realize, I'm in the belly of the whale. I need to get out. I'm ready to be born again, right? And so if you find yourself in that place, know that at any moment, once you come to yourself, like the prodigal son, I love how the scripture says that, he came to himself, new thought, right? And he had that new thought, and then he began the journey back home. So in this place, T'Challa has an awakening moment. He experiences that metamorphosis. And he finally has the opportunity to kill Helmut Zemo because Captain America and Iron Man are trying to kill each other. And he has this wonderful opportunity now to get his vengeance. But he realizes something, and he says this: vengeance has consumed you. It's consuming them. I'm done letting it consume me. Justice will soon come. And so there in that moment is the symbolic moment where he's now allowing himself to be birthed, to come out of the belly of the whale, to now be initiated. And of course, we're going to talk about the Black Panther next week. Can't wait for that message, but we're going to talk about it. So then we recognize it's out of that. Now we get the emergence of this new story of now he can become the king. Right? But if he had never dealt with this idea of vengeance and letting that go, he couldn't have dealt with Killmonger, right? He couldn't even understood Eric Killmonger because Eric Killmonger was in this place of wanting vengeance. So T'Challa had already been there. That's why he could understand him. Y'all see that? It's beautiful. And so he has emerged through his experience. And then we also see, from Marvel movies, we always get the extra scenes after the credits. You got to stay after the credits. You got to sit there and wait. I always look at people when they leave. I'm like, y'all need to sit, right? And so we have another clue that our hero is transformed. He's transformed. He must have been doing some forgiveness work and had some forgiveness sheets, y'all. Because what does he do? We see him with Steve Rogers and Captain America and Bucky, this guy who was responsible for his father's death, and he's there now to help him get his mind right? And he says, your friend and my father, they were both victims, but if I can help one of them get peace, I want to do it. And so he's taking him home back to Wakanda, the man that's responsible for the death of their king. That's some powerful forgiveness, y'all. But that's the recognition, and we all know it. You know you've come out of the belly of the whale when the trigger and the charge is no longer there around that thing that you were holding the unforgiveness for. You know that you've been initiated into greatness. And we see that example right there with T'Challa. It's clear. It's so clear. And so I want to read one final thing that Joseph Campbell writes about initiation. and this second act. And I think this will help us as we're moving forward. And so he writes, in the vocabulary of the mystics, this stage of initiation, the second stage of the way, that is the purification of the self. When the senses are cleansed and humbled, and the energies and interests concentrated upon transcendental things, or in a vocabulary of more modern turn, this is the process of dissolving, transcending, or transmuting the infantile images of our personal past. This is what T'Challa did. He dissolved and transmuted the infantile images, those base emotions or things that say an eye for an eye and I must get you, right? He transcended those things, realizing that there was something greater that he was able to do. Goes on. In our dreams, the ageless perils, gargoyles, trials, secret helpers, and instructive figures are nightly still encountered. And in their forms, we may see reflected not only the whole picture of our present case, but also the clues to what we must do to be saved. So what is he saying? If you got to know something about Joseph Campbell here. Joseph Campbell is a student of Carl Jung. Big student of Carl Jung, and his work is highly influenced by Carl Jung. And so to understand even more about Campbell, go study Carl Jung, right? And so here he's getting us into psychoanalysis, and particularly the psychoanalysis of dreams. What we understand and what you can understand, and I invite you to use this tool, particularly wherever you are in your process or in the moment and you feel something is emerging but you don't know how to move through it. The first thing is your dreams are going to show you where you are. And if you grab the book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, he gives some wonderful examples of that. But your dreams show you where you are, and because your mind can process it through images. And so while we may not believe in physical devils or gargoyles, those things are present in our dream life to represent the same things that we just talked about. But what's interesting is that the dreams do not just show us where we are, like, oh, you just stuck, or, oh, you're in trouble, or, oh, you feel like you can't get out. But it also gives you the clues of how to save yourself. So if you're in this place of a challenge, if you're in this place, and for myself as I'm moving through this process, it's been very interesting with my grandfather's transition. I'm paying attention to my dreams. I'm paying attention to my dreams because I recognize that they're going to show me how to move through the stages of grief, right? They're going to allow me to move through them elegantly and move through them gracefully, because I understand that this too shall pass. I understand that these emotions are not permanent, but many times we don't understand that, and we allow ourselves to stay fixed in that and not pay attention to the clues that are being given to us all the time. So pay attention to your dreams. If you want, when you wake up in the morning, write it down, what's going on. And as you begin to read through it, maybe after the first week or after the first couple weeks, you'll start to see, because you are always on the hero's journey, that the secret helpers are there, and the clues are there, and the way out and the way around is there. And you'll begin to see, because each and every one of us, our individual dreams, it's our own mythological, metaphorical nature for our very own selves. My dreams aren't going to speak to you the way your dreams speak to you. But we're pulling from this collective unconscious, as Carl Jung has brought to us this idea, these archetypes, which is a part of the soul of the world that we share and we pull from this one mind. This is why we find the similarities between stories across all cultures, because we're pulling from this collective unconscious. And that story is a story that's going on and on and on, and each of us are on this journey. But we have to choose to become the superhero. We have to choose to be initiated into our greatness, being willing to be introduced again to the world, being willing again to innovate who and what we thought we were. Being willing to start again, being willing to recognize that who we know ourselves to be is not all of who we are, and being willing to shed that skin. I love how nature just shows us that so clearly. Being willing to shed the skin. Have you ever just contemplated a seed? Have you ever just stared at a seed and thought about what it represents, an acorn? An acorn is very small. Can become an oak tree. And these are massive trees that live longer than humans. But all it is a little thing. Full of potential, full of possibility. Everything that it will become, everything that it will be is contained within that tiny, minuscule little acorn or little seed. But what has to happen for it to become its greater self? It has to go into the belly of the whale. And then what has to happen? It has to shed its outer skin. It's the only way it becomes what was always within it. Allow yourself to be initiated into your greatness. There's more. There's more. There's more. There's more. With that, I say amen. Amen. Ashe. And so it is. And so it is.